it's time to look at the main lines and see what's going on bishop c5 line. As I mentioned in the queen f6 sideline video, we would go here knight b3. Although in this video I would like to briefly go through some other very valid options if you're an endgame player, want an easy plan, or don't feel like sharp and complicated positions. And these two options are knight c6 and bishop e3. Let's start with bishop e3. Queen f6, and we transposed into the move order for queen f6, bishop e3, bishop c5. Here white should go c3, otherwise b2 pawn is hanging, we cannot move the knight. Knight ge7, and it's important to go bishop c4. We provocate the move knight e5. If white chose to slowly develop and play bishop e2, then black would have very powerful break in the center with d5. That's why we play bishop c4, knight e5, and bishop e2. We provocated knight e5 because it runs under f4 in many positions, and it is in our favor. If, let's say, black would go here d5, after castle, to take the pawn on e4 would be very greedy because we would have knight b5, right away we are attacking the c7 pawn, bishop d6, because the bishop is also hanging on c5. For example, if black could play move like queen c6, then white would take the bishop on c5, queen c5, and have very powerful move queen d4. Now we're attacking the queen. The queen cannot move because it's overloaded, defending the e5 knight and the c7 pawn. And if queen takes queen, then after c takes d4, we have double attack. The knight is hanging on e5 and the pawn on c7, so it's completely winning for white. That's why after knight b5, bishop d6 is kind of forced. And here we have very strong bishop c5. We don't want to give knight d6 cd and don't take this pawn. We want to take this pawn, and there is no way black can defend it. For example, bishop c5 runs into knight c7, and if black decides to defend the bishop and play knight f5, then we would take bishop d6, cd6, and knight c7 completely wins. This is why after bishop c5 castle, it returns the pawn, but we would have two bishops and a very clear advantage. Take, queen d6, white has perfect position. This is why after d5, if castle and castle, we would go f4. And now we see that we provocated with bishop c4, knight e5, and f4 is very much into our position. For example, after f4, if black goes back, let's say to c6, then e5, and we have a very strong center, pawns in the center, e5, and black queen is still misplaced a bit. So after bishop e2, queen g6 is the move black should play. Castle, we have to defend the g2 pawn, and also we have to develop d6 and f4. Here, this is the move where white is choosing to give up on e4 pawn. White, of course, can play f3, but let's say after castle, knight d2, and d5, I don't think that white is fighting for any advantage. It is very complicated position, but if you ask me, I would prefer black pieces to play here. After d6, there is another valid option, king h1. It gives the pawn on e4, but after queen e4, queen might be tiny bit misplaced if we could only use it. But unfortunately, there is no way that we can trap the queen. There is only a way to do a perpetual, like knight d2, queen g6, bishop h5, queen d3, and bishop e2. So let's get back to d6 and f4. Queen e4. Now we cannot take on e5 because our bishop on e3 is hanging. And after bishop f2, it is important for black to take on d4. Black cannot go knight 5 c6, for example, because then we really see that the queen is in danger. Bishop d3, queen d5, queen f4 is bad because we will take on c6, and after taking back, doesn't matter with knight or pawn, we have bishop c5 and the queen is hanging, so we are winning the piece. After bishop d3 and queen d5, we will play rook e1. We are not allowing black to castle. And let's say something like bishop e6 would not work because of bishop e4, and now queen is in real danger. Queen c4, knight d2, lots of tempos. We're winning. Queen a6 and f5 with a clear advantage. So after bishop f2, it is important to take bishop d4, cd4, and knight g6. Now f4 pawn is hanging, so we're forced to play g3, bishop h3, bishop f3 first, queen f5, and rook e1. If we look at this position, it might seem that, yeah, we have quite good compensation for the pawn. We have our rook on e-file. These bishops are great, but after d5, I think that white has nothing. It's of course playable position, but black is doing fine. Queen b3, castle, knight c3. We should not take on b7, of course, because after queen b7, there would be rook a b8, queen a7, and rook b2. And our king is slightly weakened, and we don't want to allow this. So after castle, knight c3, there are many options for black. He could go c6 or bishop g4, which was played in the game of Nakamura against Grishuk 2009. It ended in a draw because after bishop d5, black takes with knight. We have to take with the queen because it's really not possible to allow the queen and the bishop battery. We have very weak light squares. So queen d5, and knight d5 with an equal position. But of course, if you like this position, it's playable for white. I just don't think that there is advantage in this line for white. Now let's take a look at knight c6. Knight c6. Knight c6 is somewhat easier. We don't have to give any pawns. We are just playing for a little pluses, and we are playing for an endgame. Knight c6, queen f6, and queen f3. Now black can transpose into main lines with many move orders. He can take on f3 first, g takes f3, and b takes c6. Or he can take on c6, and we will play knight d2, but we won't play knight d2 because we want to take on f3 with the knight. No. After queen f3, we would still take with the pawn on g2, because first of all, it opens for us the g file. The pawn on e4 is defended, and we really need some open files for our rooks. That's why after knight d2, d6, and bishop e2, there are many moves. Bishop d3 is also possible, bishop e2 is also possible, But I think that's bishop e2. In bishop e2, white has more chances. He's giving chances to black to go wrong because somehow logical moves leads to worse endgame in this position. So for example, queen f3 and g takes f3, still no bishop f3, no knight f3, but pawn takes the queen. G takes f3, and here was a game between, once again, my husband Nxc6 and Navarra in 2011, and somehow here Navarra played very logical moves, very logical plan, but it led to a worse endgame. Let's take a look at first how can white get dream position, let's say so. Knight e7, quite okay move, develop, we want to castle. Knight b3, bishop b6, a4. For now everything is kind of forced. a5, because white would trap the bishop on b6, bishop e3, bishop e3, f takes e3, and f5. Now it looks that this was the correct plan for black. You should break the center and you should do something. But what Navarra missed is quite easy to miss, because here after f5, first we play rook g1, and after castle or g6, we would go long castle. If f takes, and bishop e6, we would go knight d4, bishop d7, and once again the great idea which was played in the game of Anish and Navarra, e5. This is a very important idea to remember if you want to play the knight c6 variation. What is this move about? First of all, de5. It wins the pawn, but it looks disaster for black. We would go knight b3 or knight f3, also possible. Knight f3, then we force black to go for e4 and knight e5. Also, knight b3 is possible to pin the rook on a8 to defend the pawn on a5, and of course we have this very beautiful square on c5 for our knight. And if on rook g1 black would castle, then once again a very powerful move, e5. And the idea is the same. If d takes e5, bishop c4 first, not to allow bishop e6 with any problems, and king h8, long castle. Once again, we have control of this very beautiful square on c5. The pawn on a5 is weak, and knight on c5 would be a beast. That's why after e5, bishop e6 was played, knight d4, bishop d5, e takes d6, c takes d6, and long castle. White has very pleasant position and very nice advantage. But now let's go how black should play and how black should respond this bishop e2 line. G takes f3. One interesting option is to go a5. The idea is to keep the option of knight f6. I think that in this position it's not good to play for f5, but what black should do is just develop normally with knight f6 and not try to break white's center for the moment. a5, a4, we don't want to allow a4, knight f6, knight b3, bishop b6, rook g1. For example, now here there is a nice motive for black. If white would somehow, for some reason, I don't know what reason, castle here, just to have the king in on h1 square or not in the center, then there is a very powerful g5 move. g5 is great because it takes the f4 square under control. It uses the fact that white cannot take on g5 because of rook g8 and white is losing the piece. And let's say after bishop e3, black would still take on e3, f takes, and h5. And I really like this position for black. Black has more space to breathe and our king is a little bit in an awkward situation. Now where he should go is not really known. And also the big problem would be the e4 pawn, because after g4 pawn, knight e4 we really don't want to allow. All right, no castle, but rook g1. g6, bishop h6, not to allow castle for black, and king e7. And I think that this position is quite good for black. I don't know, it doesn't look like white has any advantage. It's of course playable endgame, and if you like it for white, then go for it. You have to realize that there is at the moment no advantage, but it is a very, very playable endgame. Once again, I would myself go for knight b3 line, which we will see in the next videos, but knight c6 and bishop e3 are very, very valid options. So stay tuned for knight b3 line and see you in the next video.